Go.
Good afternoon. I'm Pam Young, Executive Director of DANCECleveland, and we are a dance presenting organization along with Cuyahoga Community College Presents that will be having rubber band dance on the Ohio Theater stage this weekend. And I'm very excited to welcome Victor Quijada, founder and choreographer of Rubber Band Dance, and Consul General Comartin of the Canadian Council in Detroit. And so welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, this is exciting. So we're just going to have a little chat here,
Great.
Check it all out, see what we can find out about you, drill into it.
Great.
So maybe you want to start by talking a little bit about sort of your dance history and how you came to found Rubber Band Dance.
Okay. I'll try to shorten it down. It starts in Los Angeles, and as a young kid, like a lot of the kids in the neighborhood, swept up by the wave of hip-hop culture. It was a new thing, this hip-hop that was inspiring, and I felt that what I was seeing through the dance, through the art, through the music, through the rapping, that I could connect to it and that I could express myself in a way. And so that became a big part of my life, my young adult life. And that's how I came to dance. It was at the Los Angeles County High School for the Arts that I began formal training and was introduced to modern dance and ballet, and then that somehow felt that I needed to choose in between that hip-hop identity that was such a big part of me, and I chose to focus on a career in contemporary dance. And that took me from Los Angeles to New York, where I danced with Quijada and other choreographers working in neoclassical and contemporary styles. And after about 5 years in New York, moved to Montreal to join the Grand Ballet Canadien. And there with that company was dancing classics, Balanchine, neoclassical, but also contemporary works by Yuri Kilian and Ohad Naharin and Nacho Duato and Matt Seck. And what happened along the way was that when I got to Montreal, funny enough, I had been living in New York, the mecca of hip hop, but while I was there, because I had not started formal dance training as a young kid, I was obsessed with classical dance. But when I got to Montreal, hip hop was in the air, and I reconnected to who and what I was in Los Angeles. And so after about 2 seasons with Le Grand Ballet, I had this urge to bring the two parts of me together. Rubber Band Dance Group became the laboratory where I would do that. And it's been about 17 years now that I have the company.
Wow.
Yeah, in a nutshell.
In a nutshell, that's great. You know, it's so wonderful that we have a Canadian company here and that you're here to talk about Canada as well, and really how the arts can be a cultural export, and how important is that? How does that create some bridges in understanding?
Well, for a long number of years, the Canadian government has been really strong on seeing cultural events to be exported. I'm responsible for 4 states in Canada, or in the United States, and we have consulates all over the United States doing the same thing. It's a key part of our reaching out to other countries. We do it obviously here in the United States, but we do it all over the globe as well, Europe and Asia in particular. And it's very much part of, I think, the Canadian identity that we're able to reach out. Canada is very proud about the fact that we're a multicultural society, a formal one, and the type of work that Victor does is replicated in any number of other performing arts groups, but our writers, our filmmakers, and it's a great tool, taking advantage of you here, Victor, but it's a great tool on our behalf as diplomats to be able to reach out to other parts of the world and say, this is what Canada is like.
Well, and we were talking about it a few minutes ago, that as a country that has been so embracing of so many immigrants coming in, dance is one of the art forms where language is not so important and can be really make everyone feel at home. You sort of feel like, oh, you know, every culture has dance, and so to be able to come and see dance is so important. And there's an explosion of dance in Canada. We were talking about how Montreal has really become a real center for dance in the world, comparing it to Tel Aviv and Montreal and of course New York and LA, but how important it has been, and you've been a big part of that.
Thank you. I think when, you know, looking back almost 20 years to the year 2000 when I got to Montreal, there were only a handful of companies worldwide that were exploring what hip-hop in a theater setting could be or should be, or what happens to hip-hop when it is placed outside of its vernacular setting. And I was saying this outside, that I don't know if I would have been able to develop that distinct artistic vision that I've been able to develop over the last 17 years if I was not in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, because there's such a support financially, but also just like the importance of culture in Montreal, in Quebec, in Canada in general, has made it that, yeah, we've been I've been lucky to be supported in that development of finding what it is that I want to say with the cross-pollination of all these different cultural inputs that I've been lucky to experience.
Well, in Canada, one of the ways that they really support the arts too, and dance in particular, a couple of ways, are that there are presenters dotted completely across the country, and dance companies are often routed across the whole country. And it's all art forms, because there's a large First Nation dance troops that are there. There's as we talked about, National Ballet of Canada. There's very classical, strong ballet companies, modern companies, and companies like yours. Hip hop, there aren't, I don't think, as many hip hop companies. So you've been a real driver.
Montreal has become, in the last 15 years, has been a hotbed, an incubator for that. And I think my company was one of the first companies to really, in Montreal at least, to delve deeply, not just because what I do is not necessarily street dance in a theater. It's taking those street dance influence, my roots that come from street dance, but then framing them or using contemporary and classical compositional tools that I've acquired over my professional career, and letting those two informations or three informations or multi-informations allow that to become a new thing on its own. So it's not necessarily just breaking or break dance on stage, but it's the coming together of many different informations.
Well, Pam, if I can interrupt, Victor's being a bit shy here. The reality, and I think it's important both for him and the creativity that he brought, and the response that he got from the community, went very well together. Amazingly creative, moving dance in an area that we had not seen yet, and he's done an extremely good job on that. But I think he was able to do it as well as he was able to do it because he got such a strong positive reception from the community in Montreal and, quite frankly, across the country. I think I just want to pay that accolade to him.
Well, and I have to agree with you, having just been in Canada, seeing thousands and thousands of audience members loudly cheering dance. It's a very culturally savvy communities in Canada, and they love, and they just sort of can't eat it up fast enough, really. But it's interesting that you talk about the fusion of your work to incorporate so many types of dance and all of the things that have been in your body in terms of movement. But you were Mexican heritage in Los Angeles, in New York, now in Montreal, so it's French Canadian.
Yeah.
And so your life in a lot of ways is a fusion as well. And
Yeah.
so learning to adapt all of those things sort of translates into how you, sounds like how you make work as well.
I think so. I think it has translated into what I've done, and now, I mean, as artists, we take what we are going through and we take what we are observing and we express that through our art form. And now that, 6 years ago, I kind of retired from performing on stage so I can really focus on directing and choreography. And that was a big shift in my life. I became a father. That was a big shift in my life.
That'll do it.
And speaking of culture, growing up in Los Angeles to Mexican parents, I never thought that my daughter would be a francophone, French-speaking child. And so in our home, I speak Spanish to my daughter. She speaks French to her mother. In between, me and Anne, we speak English. So there's a very multicultural thing that I'm living with, and we're presenting Vic's Mix here in Cleveland, but I'm working on a new show that dives right into culture and identity and assimilation and what it is to leave roots or to make roots, and that's what we do. And I think Canada is super supportive for all those visions.
And that is a Canadian story in a lot of ways. So
over and over again, yeah, for sure.
Well, I keep saying, like my parents came from Mexico and they came to Los Angeles for that American dream, and then I went north for this Canadian dream. I didn't even know it existed, but I feel like I'm really living it.
You shared a very interesting statistic about the number of people who are in this sort of art sector in Canada.
So we've got a population of roughly 35, 36 million people, but we employ on an annual basis 750,000 people in the arts.
Isn't that amazing? What a percentage of the arts. It's no wonder that's a community that values and loves the arts so much.
No, there's a respect in Canada for artists in any number of fields, every field, quite frankly, that I think is extremely embedded. And I think, again, the multicultural nature, the diversity within our society lends itself very strongly to that reality.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being with us and talking on Facebook to a broader audience. It's really exciting to have the company here, and such a real honor that you would come and visit us at this time. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.